work. You don't gotta do the work.
Now, but a lot of them are of the view that in the short term at least, given the situation the Conservatives find themselves in and this deal being struck with the DUP and therefore lots of tricky moments to come in the House of Commons, that just let them stew. Let the Conservatives try and get on with it, continue to try and make the argument that they can be an alternative government at some stage in the future.
Thanks very much indeed, Chris. I'll talk to you later. Chris Mason, political correspondent in Downing Street for us. More of your driving test stories. We're doing this because it turns out Birmingham is the hardest place in the country to pass your test. Mark is in Solihull. Started the test by stalling the car in the car park at the test centre. I swore, turned off the car, did everything properly, restarted, kept the revs high to ensure no stalling, went nowhere, swore, got angry, realised I hadn't put it in gear. Left the test centre straight into 8 o'clock in the morning Birmingham traffic, went nowhere for 25 minutes, got told by the examiner to turn left back towards the test centre, quickly do a 3-point turn and parallel park, then test ended. I'd gone about 200 metres in total, passed my test first time. An anonymous one here. My sister got in the car with the driving examiner, adjusted the mirror, then for some reason, probably nerves, let the handbrake off. The car rolled 2 feet backwards into the driving centre wall. There was no damage. She said, "Oh no, I've probably failed, haven't I?" He replied, "Yes, you probably have." She did. She hadn't even started the engine. Dave's now in London, but did his driving test in the 1980s in Belfast during a civil disturbance. In a 30-mile-an-hour zone, it's interesting he remembers this detail, I turned the corner into a stone-throwing mob attacking the police and army. The examiner told me to turn the car. I responded by asking 3-point turn. He said, "I don't care what you bloody do, just get us out of here and put your foot down." Still passed. It's 11 o'clock.
First for news and the best live sport. This is BBC 5 Live.
Adrian Childs here with 5 Live Daily. In the next hour, we'll keep our eye on Downing Street, where the DUP leader Arlene Foster and Theresa May are expected to make an announcement about their deal. We'll be talking to an expert on tower block cladding to find out how these fire safety checks are supposed to work. And did they work in the past? Were they done at the same level as they'd be doing now in the past? There's so much confusion. And I'll speak to a man. Do not miss this. It'll be on from 11:30. Whatever you're doing, stop doing this and listen for half an hour. This is the guy who won the George Cross, was awarded the George Cross after defusing 119 improvised explosive devices in one 6-month tour of duty in Afghanistan. He's written his memoirs. It's an absolutely astounding piece of work. Do not miss that.
The top news on 5 Live this hour. The government's urging councils to speed up fire safety tests on tower blocks.
In sport, the West Indies win the toss in their Women's World Cup match against Australia. They want to bowl, but end up batting. Live to Taunton shortly.
Do you know about this morning? Do take us with you on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the iPlayer radio app.
This is BBC 5 Live.
Let's get the BBC News on 5 Live with Joe Critcher.
The Housing Minister, Alok Sharma, says fire safety testing is going on round the clock on tower blocks in England. 60 high-rise buildings in 25 areas have so far failed cladding checks following the Grenfell Tower disaster. Warren Spencer is a lawyer at Blackhurst Budd.
The council are doing what they should be doing, which is to make premises good and make them safe, which is effectively a repair which they're under a duty to remedy. They really have to go along with the council, and there may be a claim for compensation afterwards for any consequential loss from being rehoused or being removed really as a result of unsafe premises.
The DUP leader, Arlene Foster, has arrived at Downing Street for talks with Theresa May. A deal between the two parties is expected to be announced shortly. It means the Democratic Unionist Party's 10 MPs will support the minority Conservative government on what's called a confidence and supply basis. Here's our political correspondent, Chris Mason.
In essence, it means that the DUP will agree to back the Conservatives on the very big votes. So votes of confidence and votes of supply. That basically means money, things like a budget. The crucial bit, though, will be how much detail do we get about what the DUP have managed to secure in return.
The music producer Jonathan King has appeared in court charged with 18 historical sex offences against teenage boys. His lawyer says he'll be contesting the charges. He's been bailed until July. Theresa May will set out later what she's prepared to offer EU nationals living in the UK after Brexit. Details of a scheme under which Europeans will be allowed to apply for settled status will be published. The Prime Minister will also outline the guarantees she wants for British expatriates. A woman who lost 3 relatives in the Tunisia terror attack 2 years ago has told 5 Live Daily a charity she set up has helped some of those who lost loved ones in the Manchester bombing. 38 people died when a gunman opened fire on a beach in Sousse in 2015. Susie Evans lost her son Joel, father Pat and brother Aid. Her other son Owen was also injured. They've since set up a charity to help others like them.
We help families that have been affected by murder, and that's domestic murder as well as terrorism. We do the practical stuff. We'll help with utility bills, we'll pay for somebody to go in and clean the house, pay for the children to have new bikes, just things they need straight away, which, I know what I needed.
Iraqi forces say they pushed the Islamic State group into a corner of Mosul's old city. They're now confined to just 1 square mile. The operation to retake the city, which began last October, is in its final phase. The Royal Navy's new aircraft carrier is due to leave its dock at Rosyth in Fife for the first time. HMS Queen Elizabeth weighs 65,000 tonnes and is one of 2 new carriers being built at a cost of more than £6 billion. Here's the Defence Secretary, Michael Fallon.
Only 3 other countries in the world building aircraft carriers. We're building 2 aircraft carriers. They will enable us to strike against terrorists in the Middle East. They'll enable us to sail with NATO and American allies. They will help keep the peace around the world and keep our country safe for the next half century.
That was the Defence Secretary Michael Fallon speaking there. Now the sport with Will Perry.
Well, there's been a confusing start to the Women's World Cup match between the holders, Australia and the West Indies. Live to Taunton, Henry Moran.
Well, it's unusual the hostilities start as soon as the toss in a game of international sport. But here, when Stefanie Taylor elected to have a bat first and changed it to having a bowl first at the toss, well, understandably, Australia's skipper Meg Lanning wasn't particularly happy. She said, well, hold on a minute. What you said first, that has to stand, surely. So they went to the laws of the game. Law 12.5 suggested that, and in fact stated that once you've made a decision, you have to stick with that option. So it means, after all that, the West Indies are batting first. They're moving along at a steady pace. We've had 10 overs so far at an overcast Taunton. The score 34 without loss.
Commentary on 5 Live Sports Extra. South Africa have included 3 uncapped players in their squad to play England in the Test Series, which starts next week. Batsman Heino Kuhn, Aiden, Mark Cram and all-rounder Andile Peklaweo come in, with Stephen Cook and Wayne Parnell dropped. Kent have signed New Zealand all-rounder Jimmy Neesham for this summer's T20 Blast. Kyle Edmund, Cameron Norrie, Heather Watson and Naomi Brodie are all in action at the Eastbourne International this morning. Wimbledon qualifying is also taking place at Roehampton. Marcus Willis takes on the world number 146, Andre Martin of Slovakia. And 7-time Grand Slam winner John McEnroe says Serena Williams would be ranked around 700th in the men's game. Promoting his new book, McEnroe says best female player ever, no question. If she had to play the men's circuit, that would be an entirely different story.
This is BBC 5 Live on digital, online, smartphone and tablet.
A few showers across Scotland, otherwise a mainly dry day with some sunny spells. Cloud building from the southwest through the day, rain arriving into Northern Ireland later this afternoon. Temperatures struggling to get much above 15 Celsius here. Otherwise, they'll range from 17 in Scotland, 21 in Wales and as high as 24 or 25 Celsius for east and southeast England. Rain heavy at times continues across Northern Ireland through this evening and then transfers to Scotland, North Wales and Northern England. Elsewhere, a dry, cloudy and mild night, apart from the Northern Isles where it'll become quite chilly under clearer skies. An unsettled day tomorrow with rain for many.
On the roads, there's just one problem to mention. That's in Worcestershire on the M5 southbound, where an accident involving several vehicles has closed 2 lanes between junction 5 for Droitwich and junction 6 for Warndon Way. Traffic's queuing in that area. Joe Pritchard, 5 Live Travel.
Brexit cast. Wolverhampton, 63% leave.
Brexit means Brexit.
As the Brexit negotiations begin, so does Brexit Cast.
Our weekly podcast will follow the twists and turns of the talks with me, Chris Mason, here in Westminster.
And me, Adam Fleming, here in Brussels. We'll tell you what's really going on behind the scenes.
We'll be there for any key moments.
Brexit Cast.
Download the podcast now.
From BBC Politics and BBC 5 Live.
First for news and the best live sport. This is BBC 5 Live. 5 Live Daily with Adrian Childs.
It's nearly 8 minutes past 11. It was on Thursday last week that Theresa May first revealed fears that tower blocks around the country could have cladding that isn't fire safe. She said the government urgently wanted tests to be carried out. Since then, not a single building that's been tested has passed that test. So that means there are now 60 high-rises across 25 councils where the cladding has failed the fire safety test. In total, 600 buildings are due to undergo the test. This comes as Camden Council still has about 200 residents refusing to leave 4 tower blocks on the Chalcots estate. They've been told they must leave to allow urgent improvement works to go ahead. Linda is one of those who doesn't want to move out.
At some point, I think I will possibly be forced, but at the moment I don't wish to go because it's an absolute, total disruption of everybody's life. And for a single person like me, they'll expect me to stay in a large hall with hundreds of people, screaming kids, lights on all night. There's no way, you know, that I will get a bit of peace and quiet. It's impossible. I am no expert in dealing with large groups of people moving in and out of properties, but what I would say is that the council could have dealt with this a lot better. They could have done one block at a time, and meantime, for the other blocks that are apparently in risk of fire, at the moment they've got fire wardens crawling all over the shop. They won't allow us in without a fire warden opening the door, and they've stopped people coming into the block. So a lot of people have got to go to alternative accommodation, which is not very good, I might say. And I'm in fear now that I won't be allowed in my block tonight.
The Chalcots estate was refurbished between 2006 and 2009 by Ryder. As you remember, that's the firm which oversaw work at Grenfell Tower in the last few years. Rachel was in Camden this morning for breakfast. She spoke to Shah, who was evacuated along with his family.
In the beginning, they told us, we can't accommodate you anywhere. You either stay here the night or, you find your own accommodation.
Here is the leisure centre.
Here at the leisure centre on these inflatable beds, but it's already overcrowded. So, although there was somewhere to stay, there wasn't somewhere to stay because...
And what was it like in there? Was it noisy, lots of activity?
I mean, the children didn't seem to know exactly what was going on, not all of them anyway, so for them it was a bit of an adventure, but for the adults you could really see everybody really stressed out. They don't know what's happening, they don't know where they're going, so yeah, definitely the community came together, and we just supported each other.
And did they give you any sense how long this might be for?
Not at all. There was literally no communication from the council whatsoever, so from the point of we're going to evacuate you till this point right now, we wasn't kept in the loop, no communication whatsoever in terms of how they're going to do this, what the timescales are. There's rumours going around, it might be 2 weeks, it might be 2 months, but we don't know anything.
So from there, you got to the leisure centre, not much room there. What did they do to you then? Where did they send you?
I dropped my mum and my child. I left them at the flat because there was nowhere else to go. After waiting for up to about 4 a.m. in the morning, I spoke to someone in the leisure centre, and they found me some hotel in Peckham, but it's like an area that we're not familiar with to travel there. So I still went there at 6 a.m. in the morning. I got to the hotel. They said I have to check out at 11 a.m. So I literally packed everything in my car, took it there, and just to hear that I'm going to be staying there for 4 hours, so I didn't even bother checking in. I came back to my family at my mother-in-law's. I spent the night in the car, and my son and my wife. So my wife and my son slept on a single bed, and my mum on the sofa. Yeah, and we're still waiting for somewhere to go.
Do you get the feeling, and I know it's incredibly tough for you and your family, but being here and you can see people, well, there's a big police presence here, there are people walking around in fluorescent jackets with clipboards, clearly answering questions. I guess what the council would say is, we're trying to look after you, we've got your best interests at heart. Do you get that?
Not really. I think they don't want to be accountable for deaths of hundreds of people. And that's what it comes down to now, because all these years we were living there, nobody cared. They didn't do the checks before. Now it's just nobody wants to take the blame. Who cares how much disruption is caused? Who cares about all these people's lives that, today's Eid for us, so I'm a Muslim, and today's Eid, so, you know...
It should be a day of celebration.
Exactly, so, you know, who cares about all of that? I'm not taking the blame for all these people if something does happen. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day.
That was Shah, who was evacuated along with his family from one of the towers in Camden. Just to bring you some news, breaking news, the DUP have now officially signed their agreement with the Conservative Party to support them in government. The paperwork's just been signed by the two parties' chief whips inside Downing Street, witnessed by the DUP leader Arlene Foster and the Prime Minister Theresa May. We'll bring you more details on that as we get them shortly. Just going back to the aftermath of the Grenfell Tower horror story. The Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, speaking at Glastonbury yesterday, as he put it, he said the victims of the Grenfell Tower fire were, quote, murdered by political decisions. The Shadow Housing Minister, John Healey, obviously a colleague of McDonnell's, said it's not the language he would have used.
I wouldn't use the word murder. It's not yet possible to point to direct cause and effect. We don't know the full details from Grenfell Tower, but he's right. There is clearly a current political context within which government decisions are being made, the rundown of social housing, the cut in the capacity of councils and emergency services, and also the resistance to any fresh regulation when it's needed.
Dr. Stephen Ledbetter is a consultant from the Centre for Window and Cladding Technology in Bath. Thanks very much for joining us. These tests they're being subjected to now, presumably the same tests ought to have been done 2 years ago or 5 years ago, whenever these buildings went up. Why weren't they done then?
Some of these tests have been done in the past, but the building regulations don't completely prohibit the use of these materials. You have to understand the material behaves differently in different situations, and we have a test which enables us to test exactly what we're building, and those tests should have been done, and clearly they weren't in this case.
Right, so it boils down to the same thing, that the testing regime wasn't adequate in the first place, plainly. If they were passed before, but don't pass now.
Well, we have two types of tests. We have an adequate test, which has clearly not been done, and we have a test which says that how the material behaves and gives you advice then on how you might use it. But we don't actually, in the building regulations, prohibit the use of these materials, even if they fail the test.
How did we... it sounds like I'm blaming you here. I'm not. I'm just trying to understand. How did we end up with building regulations which don't prohibit the use of inflammable cladding materials? I just don't get it.
They allow the use of inflammable materials, combustible materials, provided you do what's called a systems test. And the failing has been that those systems tests weren't done project by project.
OK, so whose job was it to do those systems tests, and why didn't they happen?
Well, the system test should be undertaken by the contractor who is designing and providing the wall if these materials are used. There are a number of failings as we run through. You could have an architect working for the client. The architect or the client should have specified what was required. Then you get to them giving the contract to a contractor, in this case Ryden for the Grenfell Tower, and then they give the contract for the cladding to a subcontractor, in this case Harley Curtain Walling. And
it's so confusing. Anyone who's had any kind of building project done, you know, you get into trouble with, not trouble exactly, but the problem is there's just too many subcontractors and nobody knows who's in charge of who. That would appear to be the case generally in all these cases.
Yes, and the specification could have changed at any stage because somebody thought that they had a better idea. We now know, of course, it wasn't. And they could have changed it, saying we're going to change it because we will do a test to demonstrate. But clearly they haven't tested. It would be for the building control officer to expect to see that the material has been proven to work. And clearly that also is a failing.
So what should have happened then, so the building control or whoever says, yes, the material is adequate, subject to the systems test, as you called it.
Yes.
So surely it is incumbent upon whoever said the material was adequate in the first place, to say that that's subject to the systems test, so before this building can be passed, before people can live in it, before it can be signed off, I want to see the results of your systems test. Now, that was neither sought nor given by the sound of it.
It seems so.
OK, in which case, you know, in most cases, in the vast majority of cases, thankfully, that it hasn't resulted in loss of life, but still as far as I can see, some potentially sort of criminal malpractice or negligence has come to pass here.
One would certainly say that it was negligent, yes.
Okay, don't go away. I still need you, although you've probably had enough already, Stephen. One of the blocks who failed the test is Elizabeth House in Wembley. Noel Brosnan is Director of Asset Management for Octavia, managed the building for Brent Council. So what do you say to what you've heard? What tests were done on the cladding on that building which you manage?
Good morning, Adrian.
Hi.
Can I say we don't manage it on behalf of Brent Council. It is a block that is owned by Octavia Housing.
Right.
And I can confirm our priority always is and will always remain the health and safety of our residents.
Right.
Now, the reassurance that we were given, this building was constructed and handed over to us in 2013. It was built for us by Wilmot Dixon. And at that time, we get the assurances that you would expect as a building professional, that it has met and complied with building regulations and it has been signed off by the local authority. In addition, we were also given reassurances that the fire strategy, which had been carefully looked at by the London Fire Brigade, had been signed off. So, of course, we were quite surprised and dismayed to hear that this building did not meet building regulations, if that is what is being said.
OK, so you're doing, in the nicest possible way, you're doing some kind of buck passing here. As far as you're concerned, all relevant tests, the adequacy of the materials test and the systems test had been done and all was well.
Yeah, I'm certainly not buck testing. There's lessons for everyone out of this.
OK, so you must be going asking the question now, surely, of building control or the council or anything and saying, so hang on a bit, you've let us down here. You know, with this building you gave us on the understanding that it was all signed off, actually wasn't. I mean, you must be furious with them, surely.
Clearly, those are questions that will be asked, and they will not just be asked of Octavia, there will be others asking those questions. My priority at this time is to make sure, given where we are, we continue to ensure the safety of our residents, and we look to get to a place where the building is fully compliant.
I don't know whether you heard what John McDonnell said yesterday. Part of it was the decision not to build homes and to view housing as only for financial speculation rather than for meeting a basic human need for politicians over decades murdered those families. Now, look, he wasn't talking about you particularly, but he's kind of talking about you know, the sort of the financial situation of companies like yourself, which are in business. It's for the business of gain, of financial gain, managing these places. That's what you're there for. Do you see that he's sort of saying you're part of the problem, people in the business which you're in?
Octavia Housing is a housing association. It's been around 150 years. It is set and was set up to look after and provide affordable housing for those who could not afford it. We are very different from some of the other organisations he may be referring to. Our priority is to provide good quality housing within London, and it is always our priority to ensure that that is safely built. We are very different from people he may be referring to. The homes we've got are generally good quality, and I am pleased that when I met with the fire brigade on Friday and he walked around the Elizabeth House with myself, he was able to give reassurance to me that he was satisfied with the way that our property was being managed, the way it had been built, and that reassurance was also given to some residents who we attended a meeting with later on that evening. I think the issue that may be being discussed is really about old existing stock. That isn't something that actually Octavia is talking about in this particular situation with Elizabeth House, which is the only block we have which has failed the ACM or the aluminium cladding test.
So, given that it's failed, why aren't the residents being marched out of there in scenes like we've seen in Camden?
Absolutely. Well, as I said, this is a very different block. We are fortunate that it is a very different situation compared with the block in Camden. Clearly, we have similarity in that we both have the same cladding, but actually you will understand that one of the biggest factors was when the fire brigade did their visit to the blocks in Camden, they were not satisfied that the internal management and the protection afforded within the building was adequate enough to compensate, and that's the test that we have been given by the DCLG. In regard to Elizabeth House, it is a modern building. It does have modern facilities, one of those being sprinklers within all flats. We also have a smoke alleviation system which, in the event of corridors filling with smoke, comes on and removes all that smoke. We have a caretaker who's present on site. So all in all, I think he was reassured that we had a building that was safe, and that has allowed us the time to consider the safe removal in a controlled manner of the cladding.
Okay, Noel Brosnan, thanks very much from Octavia. Stephen, can I just ask you, with cladding, is what's happened then, and this takes a charitable view of the situation, the focus has been on sort of climate change, environmental concerns and insulation, and the whole focus has been on that, and so we've taken our eye off the ball on fire safety issues with those materials?
No, I don't believe we've taken our eye off the ball on fire safety. We have methods of test. The issue we have is that the building regulations with regard to fire are not at all clear. They say that you should consider all filler materials and whether they are combustible, and people have not thought of the panels as being filler material, and therefore they have put them out with disregard to the fact that they are combustible, saying they're not a filler in terms of the building regulations. The building regulations are distinctly unclear here. My own organisation published guidance explaining that the infill panels should be considered as part of the filler, and other bodies have done the same.
Thanks very much indeed for your time, Dr. Stephen Ledbetter, consultant from the Centre for Window and Cladding Technology in Bath. Let's talk about the Conservative and the DUP deal. We're just waiting for a press conference outside Downing Street. Seeing the pictures from inside, the DUP MP Geoffrey Donaldson shaking hands with the government's chief whip Gavin Williamson. Theresa May and Arlene Foster were in the room. Fergal Cochrane is vice chair of the Political Studies Association, professor of international conflict analysis at the University of Kent, currently researching the impact of Brexit on the peace process in Northern Ireland. So let's start specifically on that, Fergal. This deal, we don't know what's in it, but what is the effect like? Well, what is the worry of what the effects could be on the peace process there?
Good morning, Adrian. Well, I think the issue here really is the border and the precise, dimensions of the border post-Brexit. Sinn Féin's position is that it wants special status, an opt-out for Northern Ireland, essentially treating Northern Ireland as different from the rest of the UK. DUP specifically does not want that to happen, even though it is after, a soft Brexit on the trading side. So it changes the internal dynamics of how Brexit is perceived in Northern Ireland. It is I suppose it gives the DUP leverage over that issue in a way that Sinn Féin isn't going to have, and therefore it looks as if, there's a sort of a tilted or a stacked deck of cards with regard to Brexit. Will
it be clear what the DUP actually want in terms of the border? Because I'm not clear. I thought they wanted a hard Brexit. They sort of pro-Brexit, but didn't want wanted an open border at the same time, which is as confusing as just about everything else in the whole Brexit situation.
Yes, economically speaking, the DUP wants free movement of trade. They do, because their constituents are going to lose money if there's a lot of tariffs and if there's a lot of checks on the border. So at an economic level,